All right, what's up, guys? Chris Marler here from Saturday Down South. I'm joined by a good buddy of mine on an opposite coast, and a much better coast and time zone. Adam Spencer, how are you, man?
Doing great. Yeah, it's nice and sunny here in California as always. But living the life.
Proud of you. Yeah, I mean, what we lack in, like, I don't know, fresh air and beaches, we have in humidity in the South. It's still pretty great. So,
Oh, I
you've had
remember.
a
I remember.
you've had a very busy off season, making lists for one,
Second and twice.
arguing. I would say defending, maybe. I don't want to say arguing. That sounds way more combative. Defending your position, and a lot of these have taken off, but there's one in particular that I wanted to get into because it seems to be like the most talked about, the most criticized. You're never going to please everybody, right? But the ranking the quarterbacks in the SEC, you specifically did this in a way that I thought was perfect, and we're going to get into it here in a second, and go through your list and kind of explain who you had where. I'm not even going to give you any pushback because we agree on who number one is. Stetson Bennett, in my opinion, should be a little bit higher. We'll get to that another day. Are you ready to start the list?
Let's do it.
Okay, this is my favorite part of the list. This is why I wanted to do this video. 14 through 11, you don't have a person, just a single line item on any of like the next to any of the numbers. It's a two-party system in every single one of these. It's Mike Wright and Ken Seals at 14 for Vanderbilt. No one's gonna argue that. Brady Cook and Tyler Macon from Mizzou. Pretty surprising on that one. Zach Calzada and TJ Finley, just the hand-me-downs nobody wanted at Auburn. They're at 12. And then Haynes King and Max Johnson at 11. Real quick, anything that, like, I was a little bit surprised at 11 just because of Haynes King coming out of high school. And I'm not super impressed with Max Johnson, but he did have 27 and like touchdowns and 6 picks last year. What led you to these four?
Yeah, honestly, so I'm a little higher on Max Johnson than I am Haynes King. I know King had the high school pedigree, but he wasn't necessarily even impressive in limited action last year.
Right.
Obviously, before he got hurt, and he could still become a superstar. Like, I just haven't seen enough of him. And but I like Max Johnson. He's not going to necessarily make the big play, but outside of that one game where he threw the ball over his head, like, he does a good job taking care of the ball.
Yeah.
Mostly, with that one notable exception. So I think he might be a better fit for where the Aggies are going to be this year. You just got to get the ball to Anaya Smith. You just got to hand the ball to Devin A-Chain. Like, they've got some weapons on that side of the ball, and you just got to be a guy who facilitates that. Like, I'm on the record. I don't think that the Aggies are going to compete for a spot in the playoff this year, but they've got to get to 10 wins. That's the benchmark this year, and then set the tone for the years coming up. And I think Johnson does that a little better before Weigman's ready.
Yeah, honestly, with King, like, two things I don't like about King. One, he looks like King Joffrey from Game of Thrones. Two, he also, like, and this isn't even a detriment, it's just I've never seen this kind of quarterback really succeed or even be implemented in Jimbo Fisher's offense, which is like, he's an elite athlete. He's a very skilled runner and very fast. Johnson, like, he's had some like really big ups, and then like a lot like LSU over the past couple of seasons, right? Like, they beat Florida on the road. That was like the shoe game. He beat A&M last year at home and like a thrilling, like, come from behind win late. I don't disagree with anything there. I was a little bit surprised from the next one. We're gonna go with 10 through 6 here. Miles Brennan and Jaden Daniels at 10. We're gonna come back to that. Jackson Dart, I hate this. I hate this entire generation. Jackson, the way he spelled his name. Will Rogers, which is the main point of topic here, that we're going to discuss, because you got a lot of pushback on this. Anthony Richardson at 7 from Florida, and then Spencer Rattler at 6. Take us to the list. What you said off air, you got a lot of pushback with Will Rogers. What was that about?
Yeah, so I mean, he led the SEC in passing yards. He led the SEC in completions. He also led the SEC in completion percentage. So, but my problem comes with everyone else higher than him on the list. For now, we'll stick with Anthony Richardson and Spencer Rattler.
Right.
They're more capable of making the big play, but that's because Rogers hasn't been asked to do that. Like, he has something like a 6.6 yards per attempt on his passes from last year, and that was like 12th in the SEC or something like that of qualified passers. So he's he does what he's asked to do really well, and he can fit the ball in really tight windows. He's a great red zone passer. He puts the ball where only his guy can get it. he just hasn't been asked to do a lot of those deep balls. I've seen Anthony Richardson's deep ball, and while it needs to be more consistent, he can do it. He's got a cannon. Spencer Rattler can fling it. He's got a pro caliber arm talent, even if some of the results weren't there last year. So I haven't seen Will Rogers do that. I doubt we'll be seeing it. So again, this year. So, while he's still going to put up a ton of numbers, he's still going to lead the league in accuracy and all that. It's just, he leaves me wanting to see a little bit more before I'm able to really rank him as a top quarterback. And there's some good quarterbacks in the SEC this year, as we'll see as the list continues.
Well, and I get the fan frustration too, just because they're fans, and they're always going to be frustrated if you don't pick their guy. But at the same time, you make a good point. You really can't argue it. And there's not a more fascinating maybe prospect or quarterback going into this year than Anthony Richardson, because the upside is just tremendous, which it's been in such limited action. And then in the most extensive action we saw, it was against LSU on the road, which was not great. And then against possibly the best defense in college football history against Georgia, and that went downhill very quickly. I don't disagree with you on the Will Rogers thing. I think it's odd. Besides the Auburn game, where he just balled out in the second half, I think he was 21 of 23 at some point. It was something ridiculous. Like you said, the accuracy's there, but that was the first time I watched him really try to get the ball downfield and not just dink and dunk his way up and down the field until they get to the end zone. We're going to get into the top five here, and I'm going to let you take over. It's a good top five. Stetson Bennett, I had him at 2. Probably shouldn't have it. Honestly, just want to get some Georgia fans off my back on Twitter. Stetson Bennett at 5. Tell me why he's at 5.
Yeah, in my way too early rankings after last season, I had him a little bit lower, but the more I look at it, I just think that he's a great quarterback. You can't win a national title without but you also, again, you can't say that Stetson Bennett was the main reason that Georgia won the national title. Joe Burrow was the main reason that LSU won the national title. That defense on Georgia, that's not taking away anything from Bennett, but that Georgia defense last year was insane. So, when you only have to score 11 points to win, other than the SEC championship game, obviously, but when your defense allows 10.6 points per game or whatever it was, then you don't need to be as dynamic as some of these other guys on the list who had more responsibilities. So I think Bennett has all the talent to be able to take another step this year, because he is going to be asked to do more. He's going to have to get the ball to some of those tight ends. He's going to have to get it to A.D. Mitchell and Kyrus Jackson and some of these other guys. So, right there, I think Stetson Bennett has room for improvement, but he's also definitely capable of it, and he'll be playing maybe a little faster and looser now that he has that title under his belt.
Yeah, I will say the one thing you brought up, Stetson Bennett wasn't the reason they won the national title overall, right? But when you really look at it, that last 10 minutes, I thought it was one of the coolest things, even though I grew up a Bama fan, watching that kid who everyone, even Georgia fans in that game, in the fourth quarter of the last game of the year, still doubting him, thinking they should bring in JT Daniels. It is the finale of finales right here. And they could have ran the ball. They could have brought in another quarterback. They could have done whatever, because he was not playing that great of a game. 10 minutes left, he comes in, and Kirby just quadruples down on him being the starter, and Stetson goes 4 for 4 right down the field and scores a go-ahead touchdown. I thought that was awesome. But I think you're also right. He's very overlooked because of the fact that he looks like Screech Powers if he was a DUI lawyer. And also, he had 30 total touchdowns on 20 attempts a game. It was just absurd. And I wonder how it's going to look this year, but I think you're spot on with the analysis there. Number 4, the man who eats bananas just like a savage, Will Levis.
Yeah, so this one is I'm a little worried about it. The talent is there. He's obviously getting a lot of first round mock projections these days.
Number 1 overall.
Crazy. I wouldn't pick him at number 1 overall, but I do think he has the chance to grow into a first round quarterback. But I want to see, he plays a little bit like a Brett Favre, like a little gunslinger in his game. So he takes some chances he shouldn't. And, Wan'Dale Robinson was there to clean up a lot of that.
Yeah.
Turn some 10-yard plays into some 60-yard plays last year. And then there's the drama around Chris Rodriguez. He could be facing a suspension. So they lost a couple of key offensive linemen from last year's
really good offensive
line. So he has the talent, but this is going to be a prove it year. Like he could rise into like the top 10 picks, or he could fall into like a early day 3 selection. Like there's a lot of room for this, depending on how some stuff develops around him. He's going to have to really take a leadership role and get some go-to receivers going here, because they had that Javon Baker from Alabama in the mix, but then he ended up at UCF at the last second. So who knows who the go-to guys are going to be, but Will Levis better know, and he better hit him early and often, and or else he won't be at number 4 all year long. That's for sure.
I honestly like his upside is, I wonder how, like, the difference in the ceiling and his floor, because if you watch him just throw, right, like in shells or whatever, like tremendous release. It's unbelievably quick. And if you went to the combine, you hadn't watched the season, you hadn't heard any recruiting rankings, and you sit him next to Bryce Young, like Will Levis is going to be a much more impressive, like physical specimen and athlete in that setting. I wonder what it looks like especially if you don't have Chris Rodriguez, you lose like generational offensive lineman. That's a really good point. The number 3 and number 2, I feel like is like the best offseason argument that hasn't ended in tears or blood or Twitter wars. So KJ Jefferson's at 3. I think that's a perfect fit. Explain why he's at 3 ahead of Will Levis and ahead of Stetson.
Yeah, so I mean, he's there. He's got that dual threat thing. Will Levis is a good red zone runner. He'll lower his shoulder and do that. Stetson Bennett's an underrated runner, but KJ Jefferson is the runner in the SEC. Yeah. He was second among all SEC quarterbacks behind Emory Jones last year in rushing yards. I expect him to improve on that and lead the way this year, especially, the one knock on his game is not, with his game, but he's losing Treylon Burks, a massive guy with big hands that, his catch radius is
it's the whole entire
zip code. Yeah. So he can, so he's going to have to, work Jadon Hazelwood into the mix, the Oklahoma transfer. There's still some talent there. I just think, he's going to have to do more with his legs, but he's capable of doing that. And, his arm talent is there, but the reason that he's 3 and, to jump ahead here, and the reason that Hendon Hooker is number 2 is Hendon Hooker has his top receiver coming back.
Yeah. And I think it's a really good point. And like Hendon Hooker I don't know how he continued to go under the radar all throughout last season, because what he did was incredible. And you can't wait to see what it's going to look like over a full season. Because, for whatever reason, Joe Milton was the starter at the start of last season for Tennessee.
Yeah, that's going to go back when we look back at that at Hendon Hooker's 2022 season. It's going to be like, why wasn't that guy the starter from week 1 in Tennessee 21? So
no, I completely agree with that. The KJ Jefferson thing, I don't want to say a hot take, but a lukewarm take that I think he's really good. I think he's really talented. He's obviously one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the SEC. I wonder if a lot of his, like, the hype around him, like you look at the end of the year and you just see like the difference in obviously touchdowns and turnovers, which is fantastic. It was like 21-4. And I think he had obviously like 6 rushing touchdowns as well. But I feel like he got a lot, like his whole season and all this projection was based off the Bama game and the Ole Miss game. And that's it, because there were a lot of games against good competition. Like you look at Texas, you look at like Texas A&M. I mean, he was 7 of 15 against A&M for like 100 or 200 yards, and Treylon Burks had 180 of that. I know we talk about how great Georgia is, but I have a hard time overlooking the fact that he went 3 of 8 for, I think it was like 15 yards or something crazy like that. So without further ado, I mean, get into the Hendon Hooker thing, because everyone should be singing this kid's praises. I can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about his 2021 season, you think about the overthrows a lot of times, and you think, wow, like that guy has a cannon, but like, was he really that accurate? And the answer was yes, he was.
Yep.
Like he had like the second highest completion percentage among returning SEC quarterbacks. So
top 3 in almost everything.
Yeah, and like the touchdown to interception ratio is insane, 30-3, and then he also adds, like I think he had like 600 some yards rushing and a bunch of touchdowns on the ground. So that's, he can do it all, and that's what it was so crazy that he didn't like get full-time starting potential until like week 4. So, that was a real missed opportunity that kept him from hitting the 3,000 yard mark. He came up just short. And so I just really love what he can do. People say, well, he's a system quarterback. He's in Josh Heupel's system. It's like, okay, but he runs that system really well. And unlike Mike Leach's air raid, we actually get to see Hendon Hooker air it out to Cedric Tillman, to, he was hitting Javonte Payton on a lot of deep balls last year. So, he can make any throw on the field. I haven't seen that from Will Rogers. And Hendon Hooker needs to, show that before he goes to the NFL, he needs to show that he can make, second and third reads, which is something that he's not asked to do a lot in Josh Heupel's offense. I mean, just look at Drew Lock and boy. How, I know, but I think that Drew Lock still has a chance to shine in Seattle there. But anyway, I digress.
I knew we were gonna get a Drew Lock reference at some point.
Oh, absolutely. So Hendon Hooker has that offense down pat, and I think that if he keeps those interception totals low, he could have another huge season and work his way into the round 1 mix.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I was shocked actually that he wasn't included, that like not even a mention. Obviously, number 1 is the returning Heisman Trophy winner, Bryce Young from Alabama. Numbers he put up last year, I think 50 total touchdowns, just stupid. So like, we don't need to get into too much of Bryce Young because everyone already knows what you have with Bryce Young. I wonder how much more can he do this season? And I wonder how big of an impact that the loss of those receivers are going to be, because he lost his top 3 receivers. He gets Plateau back. But man, I really just thought, I said after the national championship that the offensive line couldn't have been worse going into next season. And then you watch the spring game, and granted, they're going up against the best defensive player in college football, maybe in the past 10, 20 years with Will Anderson, but God, that offensive line is bad. I mean, it's just really bad. So I wonder what that looks like going into this season. Share your thoughts on Bryce Young for one. And then also looking back at the list, is there a guy that we're not talking about that you think could jump up in there? I'm high on Miles Brennan and Jackson Dart just because of Lane Kiffin, his last 10 stops was an OC or a head coach. 8 of his 10 quarterbacks have had either 3,000 yards passing or 30 touchdowns. So it's just a foregone conclusion. Who's a guy like that for you?
So you want me to talk about Bryce Young first?
Whatever you want to do.
Yeah. So Bryce Young, he's the reigning Heisman winner. Nobody's ever won it twice in a row, I don't think. Right?
Griffin.
Archie Griffin back in the, okay. So he won it
with 4 total touchdowns, by the way, the second time around.
So yeah, I think that it's really hard, even being a preseason favorite to win it, which he will be obviously this year as the returning, because you have to wow the voters with your numbers. And if they can look back at last year's numbers and be like, well, you did the same thing, then they're going to vote for somebody else newer and shinier. But if Bryce Young can lose Jameson Williams, can lose John Mechie, can lose Brian Robinson, and can still go out and put up those 50 touchdowns and win an SEC championship and get to the playoff, then he should be a shoo-in for the Heisman, because he would have to deal with some of those same offensive line concerns. He has to get Jahmyr Gibbs up to speed, and I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be great as a dual threat guy out of the backfield too. Latu is a great red zone target, and then but the big thing is going to be he has to get Jermaine Burton and Tyler Harrell up to speed, and if he does that and puts up similar numbers with those two, it's forget about it. He should be the number 1 pick. Forget about CJ Stroud over there at Ohio State. Forget about Will Levis, but I think he has, if he puts up similar numbers, that is realistically a very great season for him.
I'm ecstatic you brought that up, because I have a whole other video that we're going to have in the next couple of days that is based off of every Heisman winner since Archie Griffin in the season after, if they came back, there's 8 or 9 of them, right? And the drop off in votes is just, it's staggering to even look at, even with Tebow, right? Somebody that everyone seemed to love. It's incredible. The Jameson Winston, good God. Anyway.
And so the guy that I think has the most potential to rise is actually Spencer Rattler. I think people gave up on him too quickly. I think Lincoln Riley played it right at Oklahoma. when you have a guy like Caleb Williams back there,
Yeah,
sitting on the bench, you got like if anybody else is sitting on that bench other than a guy like a Tua Tagovailoa who came in for Jalen Hurts, other than a guy like Caleb Williams, a 5-star freshman who is now a Heisman front runner this coming season. Spencer gets a chance to work through his issues, and he probably finishes the year just as strong as he did in 2020 when he went into 2021 with Heisman favorite status.
Number one overall pick.
I think he still has that potential. Did South Carolina put enough weapons around him? I don't know. Is his confidence shot from the ending at Oklahoma, which I think he's been a little dramatic about. Like, you just lost your job to a future superstar, but I think he has the potential to be a top 3 quarterback if all goes according to plan this year.
Yeah. No, I think it's a good point too. I tell you what, the one thing that I didn't realize about Spencer Rattler, because like you hear all some of the recruits, and I was not a fan of his last year until I feel like he's like really learned how to be humble. And I think being around a guy like Shane Beamer is like perfect for him, because like you just can't. I don't feel like Beamer would allow somebody to be like a huge prima donna. Like, and it's such a massive gift for South Carolina too, because they don't ever get quarterbacks like that. But his accuracy, man, like he finished his career at Oklahoma with over 70% completion percentage, and that's not a dink and dunk offense, right? And I think he finished like, I want to say it was like 11 of 13 games overall or something like that. I'm probably wrong with that. But it was something staggering, like 15 of 17, 15, 18, where he completed over 70% of his passes. And I mean, not just against like, Tulane or whatever, like it's some really good competition. So I think that's spot on. I already said mine with Jackson Dart. Tell everyone where they can find you. Tell them about the newsletter. Tell them about your corgi.
At Adam Spencer 4 on Twitter, and then go to Saturday.football and subscribe to the Saturday Football newsletter. We're gonna gear back up here for the season pretty quick, so got some exciting things planned.